She grew up beside the king who learned far too early how to wear a crown. He loved her in silence and hurt her out of fear of admitting it. Between stolen glances, barely concealed jealousy, and wrong choices, love became a weapon and a weakness. On the night of the mates' ball, everything exploded. Public humiliation, wine thrown in the king's face, and a flight that would change destinies. She was taken like a trophy. He defied kingdoms for her. A duel, a choice, a truth that could no longer be hidden. Because when an alpha finally understands what is at stake, there is no kingdom, law, or enemy that can make him retreat. Ariella had always known how to recognize Lionel's presence even before seeing him. It was instinctive, like the air itself changed texture when he entered a room, as if every nerve ending in her body snapped to attention without her willing it. And in that moment, standing in the stone corridor that led to the royal library, she felt him before his deep voice echoed off the walls. She turned, and there he was. Lionel was walking in the opposite direction, speaking with two older advisors, his posture straight, broad shoulders filling the black cloak that marked his rank. His dark hair fell in waves to his jaw, tousled in a way that looked intentional, as if he had just woken up. The hint of stubble emphasized the strong line of his jaw, and when he laughed at something one of the advisors said, Ariella felt her stomach twist. He was devastating. He always had been. But now, at 26 years old, Lionel was no longer the boy she had known. He was a fully grown man, the king of Kelthar, alpha of an ancient bloodline, possessed of a charisma that made women of every age lose their breath simply by existing in the same space as him. And Ariella hated herself for not being immune. She leaned against the cold wall, pretending to adjust the braid that held her dark hair back, and watched him. Watching was all she knew how to do lately, observing from a distance while Lionel lived a life in which she was only part of the scenery, just another piece of the court, someone he greeted politely but never truly saw. It hadn't always been like this. The memory came without warning. Ariella at 7 years old, scraped knees after falling during training, and Lionel kneeling in front of her, wiping away the blood with his own shirt while swearing he would teach the idiot who had pushed her never to do it again. She had laughed, even with tears filling her eyes, because Lionel treated her pain as if it were his own. Because back then, they were inseparable. They grew up together, trained side by side. He taught her to fight with wooden swords while Eric, the beta's son, acted as referee between them, always complaining that the two of them cheated. Ariella won most of the time. She was faster, more agile, and Lionel pretended to be outraged, but smiled in that way that made her chest warm without her knowing why. Then, Lionel's father died, and the 14-year-old boy who laughed with her became a king who carried an entire realm on his shoulders. Little by little, Lionel pulled away. Not physically, he was still there, in the castle, at training, at meals. But emotionally, he built walls so high Ariella couldn't climb them. And worse, he began bringing women inside those walls. Beautiful, noble women, even a few exotic travelers who passed through the kingdom and left with stories about the young Alpha King who kissed as if he knew exactly what he was doing. Ariella watched it all. She saw the first time he kissed Lady Cassandra during a summer festival. She saw when he danced with Lady Isadora at the winter ball, their bodies so close there wasn't room for light between them. She saw all the others, so many she lost count, and each time felt something inside her die a little more. But she never said anything. What would she say? That she had loved him since she understood the meaning of the word? That every time he touched another woman it felt as though someone were tearing pieces out of her own heart? That she spent sleepless nights imagining what it would be like if he looked at her the way he looked at those noble women who held his attention for weeks, and then vanished as if they had never existed? No. Ariella swallowed it down, smiled when necessary, and cried in silence. Until she decided she couldn't take it anymore. The mates' ball would take place in 1 week, the most important ceremony of the year, where alphas claimed their choices, where unions were sealed beneath the full moon. And everyone, absolutely everyone, expected Lionel to finally choose a Luna. Ariella knew it wouldn't be her. Logically, rationally, she knew. But the heart beating in her chest insisted on believing that maybe, just maybe, if she finally found the courage to tell the truth, something would change. So she decided. That night, she would seek out Lionel. She would tell him how she felt, and if he rejected her, well, at least she would stop living in that torturous limbo between hope and despair. The advisors said their goodbyes to Lionel and continued down the opposite corridor. The king stood there for a moment, running a hand through his hair, and Ariella felt her heart race. Now, she could go to him. She could. A woman appeared out of nowhere. Lady Sienna, daughter of a minor baron, known for her stunning beauty and for drinking more than she should at social events. She swayed slightly as she approached Lionel, the red dress slipping dangerously off one shoulder, her blonde hair in disarray. "Your Majesty," her voice slurred, thick with drink. "I was looking for you." Lionel stepped back when she tried to lean on him. "Lady Sienna, you should rest. You've clearly had too much to drink." "I haven't." She laughed, the shrill sound echoing down the empty corridor. "I just want to talk. In private." Sienna took another step, deliberately invading his personal space. "Your chambers, perhaps?" Ariella felt her blood run cold. Lionel frowned, clearly uncomfortable. "My chambers are not appropriate. I'll call a maid to escort you back to—" "Don't be so formal." Sienna ran a hand over his chest, her fingers tracing the line of his pectorals through the fabric. "And I know you enjoy female company." Ariella should have turned away. She should have left before witnessing something that would destroy her. But her feet wouldn't move. She remained frozen, watching the scene unfold like a witness to an accident she couldn't prevent. Lionel grabbed Sienna's wrist, pushing her hand away firmly but without brutality. "You're drunk, and this isn't happening." "Why not?" Her voice took on a whiny, pathetic tone. "All the others. I'm asking you to leave." Lionel's voice went cold, losing any trace of gentleness. "Now." But Sienna didn't give up. She clung to his arm, pulling him toward the royal chambers at the end of the corridor. "Just a conversation, I promise." Lionel sighed, a sound of pure exasperation, and looked around, clearly searching for help. That was when his eyes met Ariella's. For a fraction of a second, the world stopped. He saw her, saw the exact moment she interpreted the scene as just another of his easy conquests. And Ariella saw something flash in his eyes, something like panic or regret, or perhaps just the reflection of torchlight. It didn't matter. Because before he could say anything, Sienna yanked him forward with surprising strength for someone so drunk, and the door to the royal chambers opened. Lionel disappeared inside, the door closing behind them with a sound that echoed like a death sentence. Ariella stood there in the empty corridor, her heart shattered inside her chest. She didn't see what happened next. She didn't see Lionel pry Sienna's hand from his arm the moment the door closed. She didn't see him immediately call 2 maids to escort the drunken lady back to her chambers, refusing any contact beyond what was necessary. She didn't see the absolute frustration on his face when he realized Ariella had witnessed it, and likely interpreted everything in the worst possible way. All Ariella saw was the closed door, and all she felt was the last spark of hope being snuffed out like a candle in a storm. She turned and ran. She didn't know where she was going. She only knew she needed to get away, needed to put distance between herself and that cursed corridor. She ended up in the inner gardens, the same place where she used to train as a child. Ariella collapsed onto one of the stone benches, her hands shaking, her breathing uneven. She didn't cry, because if she started, she knew she wouldn't be able to stop. "Ariella?" The gentle voice made her lift her head. Eric stood a few paces away, his expression worried. He wore training clothes, leather trousers and a simple shirt, and held 2 wooden swords he was probably returning to the armory. He was handsome in his own way. Short-cut blonde hair, green eyes that always seemed to see past the masks people wore, an easy smile that put everyone at ease. But to Ariella, Eric was just Eric. The brother she never had, the friend who knew all her secrets. "I'm such a fool," she said, her voice weak. Eric dropped the swords and sat beside her without hesitation. What happened? Ariella told him about her decision to confess, about Lady Sienna, about the door closing and Hope dying. The words poured out, years of frustration finally finding a voice, and Eric listened in silence. When she finished, he wrapped an arm around her shoulders, a fraternal, comforting gesture, and Ariella leaned her head against his shoulder, finally allowing herself to cry. "Sometimes he does stupid things," Eric said softly. "Things that make no sense at all. But deep down, I think he's more lost than any of us." Ariella sobbed against his shoulder. "It doesn't matter how lost he is. It doesn't matter anymore." Eric didn't answer. He only tightened his arm around her shoulders, like he would for a sister, and let her cry. Neither of them noticed the figure standing in the shadows of the corridor that led to the gardens. Lionel saw them from afar. 2 silhouettes in the gardens. Eric with his arm around Ariella, leaning against the beta's shoulder. So close, so comfortable. He didn't see the tears, didn't see the pain written across her face. He only saw the intimacy, the trust, the jealousy he had smothered for years burned like acid in his veins. It wasn't the first time he'd seen them together. Ariella and Eric had been close since childhood. He knew that, accepted it, or thought he had. But seeing her like that, in another man's arms, while Lionel was only a few steps away, unable to be the one she turned to, Lionel turned on his heel and left before he could do something stupid. Before he could march over there and demand answers he might not want to hear. Guilt burned. Burned because he knew, somewhere buried beneath layers of pride and denial, that he had done everything wrong. The other women, the flirting, the calculated kisses always timed for when he knew she was watching. At first, it had been defense, a way to protect himself from feeling too much for someone he believed would never see him as more than a childhood friend. Then it became a pathetic strategy to provoke jealousy, to make Ariella react, to force her to show she cared. And she never did. Or he never noticed. Lionel punched the wall hard enough to crack the stone. Blood ran down his fingers, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the one consuming his chest. He was good with swords, good at ruling, good at battle strategies and political agreements. But at understanding hearts, at understanding women, at understanding her, he was a complete fool. Most of those women, he hadn't even truly touched them. He only created the illusion. Let Ariella believe there was something when there was nothing. Because the first time he saw a flicker of emotion in her eyes, when he danced with Lady Isadora and Ariella looked away too quickly, it hooked him. Hooked him on trying to draw reactions from her, on making her feel something, anything. But now he knew the truth he had always refused to see. Ariella never wanted him, not the way he wanted her. She loved Eric, she always had. The days that followed were tense. Ariella avoided Lionel. Not overtly. She still greeted him when they crossed paths in the corridors. But there was a new distance, a wall she had built that he couldn't cross. And Lionel watched. Watched when she laughed at something Eric said. Watched when the two of them walked together through the gardens. Watched and felt the jealousy grow like a living creature inside him, feeding on every look, every innocent touch, every shared moment that didn't include him. The royal guard felt everything through the mental bond that connected them. They felt the storm raging inside their king, the anger mixed with something deeper, more desperate. But no one dared comment. Not when Lionel was like that. Dangerous, unpredictable, teetering on the edge of control. The mates' ball drew closer. 3 days, 2 days, 1 day. And then, on the afternoon before the ceremony, everything exploded. Ariella was in the library, searching for a book on ancient traditions, any excuse to occupy her mind and not think about Lionel. When the door closed behind her with a final sound, her heart skipped a beat. Lionel stood in the doorway, blocking the exit. He wore simple clothes, a black shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, riding trousers, worn boots. His hair was more disheveled than usual, as if he had run his hands through it 1,000 times, and the expression on his face was something between fury and desperation. "We need to talk," he said, his voice rougher than usual. Ariella clutched the book to her chest like a shield. "We have nothing to talk about." "We do." Lionel took a step toward her. "I'm busy." "Put the book down, Ariella." It wasn't a request, it was an order. And the part of her trained to respect royal authority almost obeyed. But the wounded part, the part that had bled in silence for years, refused to yield. "You don't command me." Something dangerous flashed in Lionel's eyes. "Don't I?" He took another step, closing the distance until he was too close, deliberately invading her personal space. "Then why have you been avoiding me for a week?" "I'm not avoiding you." "You are." His voice dropped, more intense. "You barely look at me. Barely speak to me. And every time I look for you, Eric is there." Ariella felt anger rise in her throat. "Jealous, Your Majesty?" Lionel moved closer still, erasing any remaining space between them, his face inches from hers, his voice lowering into something dangerous. "Yes, Ariella." The words came slow and deliberate, laden with a sharp sarcasm that didn't match the intensity burning in his eyes. "I'm insanely jealous." He said it as if it were a joke. But the way his jaw tightened, the way his breath came uneven, the way his entire body vibrated with contained tension. Everything betrayed the truth. Ariella felt her heart race, but anger followed close behind. "Jealous?" She let out a humorless laugh. "You have no right to be jealous of anything." "I know." Lionel took another step, pinning her completely against the bookshelf, his hands braced on either side of her head. "I know I don't. But does that change anything?" "Of course it does." The words came out sharp, heavy with years of hurt. "You've never truly cared about anyone. You were too busy enjoying yourself with every woman at court." Something dangerous gleamed in Lionel's eyes. "Watch what you say." But Ariella didn't back down. On the contrary, she lifted her chin in defiance. "Why? Afraid of the truth?" She laughed bitterly. "You don't even have a type. Anyone will do." Lionel's jaw clenched violently. He was angry. She could see it in the tension of his neck muscles, in the way his hands curled into fists against the wood of the shelf. But there was something else, too. Something that almost looked like enjoyment. As if he relished seeing her finally fight back. "Anyone?" His voice was low, dangerous. "Then tell me, Ariella, if I'll take anyone?" He leaned in, his face so close she felt his warm breath against her lips. "Why don't you take me?" Her heart skipped a beat. "I'm not just anyone." "Aren't you?" Lionel tilted his head, his eyes roaming over her face as if memorizing every detail. "Then what are you?" Ariella opened her mouth, but the words didn't come. Because she didn't know the answer. She didn't know what she was to him. She never had. Lionel saw the hesitation and pressed on. "You prefer other people." The accusation burst out before she could stop it, loaded with pain she couldn't hide. Lionel frowned. What are you talking about? Eric, Ariella said, tears burning, but she blinked hard, refusing to let them fall. Eric? You think I prefer Eric? Don't you? You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? His voice took on a sharp edge. Because from what I see, you spend more time with him than with me. You laugh more with him. You trust him more. So tell me, Ariella, what am I supposed to think? You should think he's my friend. The outburst came before she could stop it. My friend who listens when I'm falling apart. Who doesn't judge me. Who doesn't go around kissing half the kingdom while expecting me to stand there and watch. The silence that followed was thick. Lionel studied her for a long moment, jaw clenched, eyes scanning her face as if waging an internal war. The irritation was still there, but mixed with something more dangerous, something that made the air between them vibrate. Ariella felt her chest tighten. The tension was suffocating, his body so close, the heat radiating from him, the way he looked at her as if he wanted to say 1,000 things but couldn't articulate a single one. She needed to leave, needed to put distance between them before she did something stupid, before she believed anything he might say. Ariella tried to move, to step aside, to escape the narrow space between his body and the shelf. But Lionel blocked her. Not aggressively. He simply moved with her, maintaining the closeness, his eyes never leaving hers, as if he knew exactly what she was trying to do, as if he wasn't going to let her. Move, she said, her voice weaker than she intended. Lionel didn't move. He only kept looking at her that way, as if seeing something he couldn't name, something that frustrated and fascinated him at the same time. Ariella saw the exact moment something in him snapped. The restraint he had held onto so tightly simply vanished. Lionel pulled her in. His hands found her waist, firm and decisive, dragging her back and erasing any distance she had tried to create. And then he kissed her. It wasn't asked for. It wasn't gentle. As if he had held it in for so long he could no longer control it. As if every second of arguing, every word exchanged, every charged look had been torture, and now he could finally breathe. And Ariella was lost. For a second, she thought about resisting, but her body wouldn't obey. Instead, her hands slid into his hair, pulling him closer, and she returned the kiss with the same intensity, the same need that had burned beneath her skin for years. Lionel growled against her mouth, a low, guttural sound that sent every nerve ending in her body alight. He pressed her fully against the shelf, his large body covering hers, eliminating any space, any chance of escape. The kiss deepened. His tongue invaded her mouth and Ariella moaned before she could stop herself. The sound itself snapped her back to reality. What was she doing? Letting herself be consumed by a kiss after years of watching him do exactly this with so many others? Ariella shoved Lionel's chest hard. He stepped back immediately, breathing hard, his lips swollen, his eyes dark. There was confusion there, and desire, and something that almost looked like fear of having gone too far. No. The word came out soft, but firm. Lionel ran a hand over his face, trying to regain control, his breathing still uneven. Ariella. Ariella ran for the door without looking back, because she knew that if she did, she wouldn't have the strength to leave. The door closed behind her with a final sound. And Lionel remained there, alone among the bookshelves, the taste of her still burning on his lips, and the devastating certainty that he had ruined everything once again. The night of the mates' ball arrived wrapped in a full moon and anticipation. The great hall had been transformed. Candles of every size illuminated every corner, casting golden shadows on the stone walls. White and silver flowers adorned the tables, their soft fragrance mingling with the scent of spiced wine and roasted meats. The music played low, waiting for the moment when the dances would begin. Nobles from all over the kingdom were in attendance. Some came with hopes of being chosen that night or at future balls. Others came simply to witness the ceremony that would seal alliances and destinies. And everyone, absolutely everyone, wondered whether King Lionel would finally choose someone this year, or postpone once again as he had in recent balls. Ariella entered the hall with her parents, her stomach twisted into knots. She wore a dark blue dress her mother had insisted was perfect for the occasion. Her black hair was loose, falling in natural waves down her back, and she had foregone excessive jewelry. If she was going to survive that night, at least she would do so as herself. Her eyes found Eric across the hall. He stood beside a young woman with brown hair and a shy smile. Lady Beatrice, Ariella realized. The way Eric looked at her, as if she were the only person in the room, made something tighten in Ariella's chest. Not jealousy, envy. Envy of someone who was loved so openly, so clearly. Then she felt it. His presence. Ariella turned slowly and found Lionel standing near the raised throne. He wore formal attire, a black tunic embroidered in silver, immaculate trousers, polished boots. His hair was more orderly, yet still held that deliberate disarray that made women sigh. And his eyes. They found her through the crowd with an intensity that made the rest of the hall disappear. For a fraction of a second, the world stopped. He saw her. She saw him. And the memory of the kiss in the library burned between them like a living ember. Then Lionel looked away first. Ariella felt her chest tighten. Of course. Of course he would look away. Of course he would pretend nothing had happened. As he always did. She turned, searching for a table where she could sit and become invisible. She found one in a corner, partially hidden by a pillar, and settled there with a glass of wine a servant offered. The ball began. Couples danced at the center of the hall. Laughter echoed through animated conversations. The music grew louder, cheerful and festive, celebrating unions yet to be announced or strengthened. Ariella drank. Not much, just enough to numb the ache that grew with every passing minute. She saw Eric approach her, concern written on his face. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," she lied. "Go back to Beatrice. Don't worry about me." Eric hesitated, clearly unconvinced, but nodded and walked away. And it was at that exact moment that Ariella felt his gaze. She lifted her eyes and found Lionel watching her from across the hall. He was no longer near the throne. He stood among groups of nobles engaged in lively conversation, but his eyes were fixed on her, and on Eric, who had just stepped away. The expression on the king's face was one she knew all too well. Jealousy. Something broke inside Ariella. Enough. She rose and walked toward the side exit of the hall. She needed to get out. She needed air. She needed... Running away again? The deep voice made her stop. Ariella turned slowly and found Lionel a few steps away, blocking her path. He had moved fast. Far too fast for someone who should have been entertaining guests. "I'm not running away," she said, keeping her voice steady. "I'm leaving. There's a difference." "Is there?" Lionel tilted his head, that crooked smile curving his lips, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Because it looks exactly like what you do every time I get close. Maybe that's because every time you get close, you end up hurting me." The words slipped out before she could filter them, laden with too much truth, too much vulnerability. Lionel took a step toward her, his voice lowering. "Did yesterday's kiss hurt you?" Ariella felt her blood boil. "Don't be ridiculous." "Then why did you run?" "Because you felt nothing." The outburst came before she could stop it. "You're here, acting as if nothing happened, like you always do." Something dangerous flashed in Lionel's eyes. "Of course I felt nothing." The words came slowly, edged with cutting sarcasm. After all, it was just another kiss, wasn't it? He said it as if it were a joke, but there was an intensity burning there, in the way he stepped closer, in the way his jaw tightened, in the way his eyes never left hers. Ariella held her breath. You're impossible. And you're running away. Lionel took another step, closing the distance. Again. I'm avoiding. She lifted her chin in defiance, avoiding making the same mistake twice. Mistake? His voice gained a rough edge. Is that what it was to you? A mistake? Before Ariella could answer, a female voice cut through the tension. Your Majesty? They both turned. Lady Vivian stood a few paces away, smiling, her eyes scanning the scene with poorly concealed curiosity. Forgive the interruption, but Elder Morrow is requesting your presence. Lionel did not move. He kept looking at Ariella as if Vivian did not exist. Tell him I'll be there shortly. Vivian hesitated, clearly surprised to be dismissed so easily. But, Your Majesty, he said it was urgent. Shortly. Lionel's voice went cold, turning into royal command. Vivian made a stiff bow and withdrew. When they were alone again, or as alone as possible in a crowded hall, Lionel focused all his attention back on Ariella. Where were we? Ariella let out a humorless laugh. You should go. The court is waiting. Your suitors are waiting. And what if I don't want to go? It doesn't matter what you want. The words came out bitter. You're the king. You have duties, obligations. And She made a vague gesture. I'm not part of that. Aren't you? Lionel moved closer still, his voice dropping to something near a growl. Then why can't I stop thinking about you? Why does seeing Eric near you drive me insane? Why is that damned kiss still burning on my mouth? Ariella felt her heart race. But the anger was still there, shielding her. Because you like games. You like wanting what you can't have. But when you do, when you finally do, she took a step back. You grow bored. Like with all the others. Lionel clenched his fists at his sides. I never what? Ariella cut in. Never truly wanted me? Never thought of me as more than the childhood friend? Then tell me, Lionel, what was that kiss? Impulse? Jealousy? Boredom? The silence that followed was heavy, and then Lionel did something she didn't expect. He stepped back, creating distance, his expression closing like an iron gate. You're right. His voice came out cold, too controlled. I don't know what it was. And you deserve someone who does. He turned to head back into the hall, but stopped, glancing over his shoulder. But since you seem so convinced that I feel nothing, perhaps you should stop acting as if you feel nothing too. And then he walked back into the great hall. Ariella stood there, trembling with anger and regret. She took a deep breath, trying to regain control, trying to understand what had just happened. But she couldn't stay there. Not alone. Not with those words still echoing in her head. She returned to the hall. Lionel was near the throne again, speaking with a group of elders. He looked completely composed, as if the last few minutes had never happened. As if she did not exist. And then Lady Vivian approached him. She touched the king's arm, smiled, said something that made the elders laugh, and Lionel smiled back. Something shattered inside Ariella. Of course he would return to that. To the proper ladies, to polite conversations, to a life where she was simply nothing. She turned to leave, this time for real, away from that castle, that ball, that man who destroyed her without even realizing it. But then she heard his voice, cutting through all the surrounding conversations. Funny how some people complain about others' choices. Ariella stopped, her heart racing. She turned slowly. Lionel was no longer speaking with the elders. He was looking directly at her from across the hall. And there was something dangerous in his gaze, something that made the air vibrate. When their own choices are already quite clear, the hall began to fall silent. Conversations died one by one as people realized something was happening. Ariella felt her blood run cold. He continued, his voice edged with something sharp that cut deeper than any blade. Perhaps I should stop being criticized for dancing with whom I dance. His eyes never left hers. When certain people already have their preferences, very clear ones. Everyone in the hall understood. He was saying that she was the hypocrite, that she complained about him being with other women while she herself had already chosen someone. Eric. He was twisting the situation, making her look foolish, naive, as if she were foolish enough to demand fidelity when she herself offered none. The humiliation burned hotter than any anger she had ever felt. Ariella crossed the hall with determined steps. She did not run. She did not flee. She walked as if she were the only person there, ignoring the whispers beginning to erupt, ignoring the stares, ignoring everything except the fury consuming every inch of her body. She stopped in front of Lionel. She grabbed a glass of wine from the nearest table and threw its contents straight into his face. The liquid ran down his perfect features, staining his tunic. The entire hall held its breath. Absolute, stunned silence, as if the world had stopped turning. Ariella did not stop. She raised her hand and struck the Alpha King across the face. The sound echoed off the stone walls like thunder. Lionel did not move. He only closed his eyes, his jaw tightening violently as the wine dripped. When he opened them again, there was something different there. Not anger, but recognition. As if he finally understood he had crossed a line he never should have. Ariella did not wait to see more. She turned and ran from the hall, her blue dress billowing behind her, the sound of her own footsteps muffled by the blood pounding in her ears. The murmur exploded the moment she disappeared. Shocked voices, outrage, some demanding immediate punishment. After all, she had assaulted the Alpha King in public. Others, too, stunned to form words. Lionel remained still for a second that felt like eternity. Then he raised his hand, silencing everyone with a single gesture. It was a misunderstanding. His voice came out calm, controlled, carrying the weight of royal authority. A disagreement between old friends. Nothing more. Elder Morrow stepped forward, clearly indignant. Your Majesty, with all due respect, she struck you. Publicly. This cannot. It can. Lionel cut him off, his eyes still fixed in the direction Ariella had taken. And it will, because anyone who uses this to tarnish Lady Ariella's honor. He finally looked at Morrow, and there was something so dangerous in that gaze that the elder instinctively stepped back. Will answer directly to me. Is that clear? No one dared argue. Lionel wiped the wine from his face with the back of his hand, his tunic ruined, his posture still impeccable. The ball continues. Enjoy yourselves. It was not a suggestion. It was an order. And then he left the hall in the opposite direction from Ariella, leaving behind a sea of whispers and speculation he had no patience to hear. He needed to think. He needed to understand how he had destroyed everything so completely, and he needed to figure out how to fix it before it was too late. Ariella reached the inner gardens with her vision blurred by tears that finally fell without restraint. She leaned against one of the marble columns, her legs giving way until she slid to the ground. Ariella. The gentle voice made her lift her head. Eric stood a few paces away, his expression split between fury and concern. I'm going to kill him, Eric said bluntly. I'm going to punch that idiot until he begs for mercy. Ariella let out a wet laugh, half sob, half disbelief. It's not worth it. It is. Eric moved closer and sat beside her. You're worth it. They sat there in silence for a while, Ariella crying as Eric simply held her hand. What neither of them knew was that while Ariella cried in the inner gardens of Kael'thar, another king was watching from far away. Aldrin of Dravok had never hidden his ambition. The kingdom of Dravok had grown in Caelthar's shadow for generations, always one step behind in power, ancestral lands, and respect among the packs. And Aldrin, unlike his predecessors, refused to accept being second. In recent months, small provocations had tested the borders. Unclaimed ambushes, calculated attacks, clear signs that someone was searching for weaknesses in the armor of the young Alpha King. Lionel knew this. He was prepared for territorial war, for political disputes, for anything Aldrin might throw at Caelthar. What he did not know was that the weakness had already been identified, and it had nothing to do with borders. Spies had been moving through Caelthar Castle for months, disguised as merchants during festivals, temporary servants during major events, even visiting nobles no one questioned. And all of them reported the same observation to Aldrin. The Alpha King, so controlled in public, lost that control when one particular lady was involved. Ariella. Hair black as a moonless night, eyes of an impossible violet, almost ethereal, unlike any other she-wolf in the kingdom. A different, striking beauty, impossible to ignore. And most importantly, the only person who made Lionel react. The spies reported everything. The way the king watched her even while feigning indifference. How he tensed when she spoke with the beta. How his self-control cracked. Small fractures. Almost imperceptible. But enough for someone who knew what to look for. Aldrin received each report with growing satisfaction. He did not need to invade Caelthar with armies. He simply needed to rip away the one thing that truly mattered. And that night, the night of the Mates' Ball, when the Alpha King himself publicly humiliated the lady, Aldrin finally had the opportunity he had been waiting for. Men were already positioned, infiltrated among servants, temporary guards, even among the guests, just waiting for the signal. When Ariella ran from the hall, alone, vulnerable, emotionally shattered, the signal was given. Lionel did not return to the ball. He wandered the castle corridors without direction, his tunic still stained with wine, Ariella's slap still burning on his face more than it should have. It was not physical pain. It was the certainty that he had crossed a line he had no right to cross. He ended up on one of the balconies overlooking the inner gardens, and that was when he saw them. Ariella sat on the ground, leaning against a marble column, and even from a distance he could see her shoulders shaking, crying. Eric was beside her, holding her hand, his posture protective. The jealousy returned like a tsunami. Rationale? No. But Lionel was beyond logic. Beyond control. He turned and left before he did something worse than he already had. He entered a side room and punched the oak table hard enough to crack the wood. The door opened. Eric entered, closing it behind him. "We need to talk," Eric said, his voice controlled but edged with something dangerous. Lionel did not turn. "Leave." "No." "I said leave, Eric." "And I said no." Eric stepped forward. "You just humiliated the woman who loves you in front of the entire kingdom. So yes, we're going to talk." Lionel spun so fast that Eric nearly stepped back. "The woman who loves me?" His voice came out in a growl. "She doesn't love me. She loves you. And you know it." Eric blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" "Don't pretend." Lionel advanced, every step loaded with tension. "I've seen you, in the gardens, yesterday. Today, always. She cries on your shoulder, laughs with you, trusts you, and you..." His voice faltered. "You are everything I should be for her." Eric shook his head, something between disbelief and anger flashing in his eyes. "You are a fool. Careful." "No, Lionel, you are a complete fool." Eric stepped forward, invading the king's space without fear. "Ariella cries on my shoulder because you destroy her. She laughs with me because I don't make her feel invisible. And she trusts me because I pay attention to her. You're in love with her, Lionel spat. You always have been. I love Beatrice. The shout echoed through the room. Eric was breathing hard, fists clenched, years of frustration finally spilling over. I love Beatrice. I've been with her for months, and Ariella is my friend, my sister. Nothing more. It never was anything more. Lionel opened his mouth, but no words came. Eric continued, his voice lowering but gaining cutting intensity. But you were so busy protecting yourself, so blinded by pride and jealousy, that you missed the obvious. He stepped closer. Ariella has always been crazy about you, since childhood, since always. And you destroyed that. You destroyed her. She never showed it, because you never gave her a reason. Eric shoved Lionel's chest with both hands. You paraded other women in front of her expecting what? That she would beg? Compete? Lionel did not step back. He stood there, absorbing the words like physical blows. She loves you. Eric shoved him again. And you're so blind you can't see it. Lionel grabbed Eric's wrists before he could shove him a third time. Don't touch me. Then hit me. Eric did not retreat. Go on. Hit me. Because that's easier than admitting you're wrong, isn't it? For a second, Lionel almost did. Almost let the rage win. His muscles tensed, the wolf inside him snarling, demanding release. But then Eric's words finally pierced the barrier of pride. Ariella has always been crazy about you. Lionel released the beta's wrists, stepping back as if burned. She never said. Because she was afraid. Eric ran a hand through his hair, exhausted. Afraid of being rejected. Afraid of being just another one. And you proved her right. The silence that followed was devastating. Lionel sank into the chair behind the table, his hands covering his face. All the anger, all the jealousy, all the pride that had sustained him for years collapsed at once. I am a complete idiot. Finally, something we agree on. Lionel lifted his eyes, and Eric saw something he rarely did, genuine vulnerability. How do I fix this? Eric sighed, some of the anger draining away. You go to her, now, and you tell the truth. All of it. No games, no pride. Just honesty. Lionel nodded, already rising. That was when the door burst open. A guard from the night patrol rushed in, face pale, breathing ragged. Your Majesty, Lady Ariella. Lionel crossed the distance in 2 steps, gripping the guard's shoulders. She what? She's gone. Her parents are in the castle. No one has been able to find her since she left the ball. The world stopped. Lionel released the guard and ran, Eric close behind. The great hall was emptying when Lionel stormed in. He found Ariella's parents near the main entrance, Lady Helena with her face wet with tears, Lord Edmund trying to maintain composure and failing miserably. Where is she? Lionel demanded. We don't know. Helena clutched his arm, desperate. We searched the entire castle, the gardens, her chambers. She's gone, Your Majesty. Our daughter is gone. Lionel turned to the royal guard, who were beginning to gather. Search every inch of this castle, every room, every corridor, every damned corner. His voice rang with absolute command. Now! The guards scattered. Lionel closed his eyes, focusing on the mental bond he shared with the guard. Through it, he could feel the presence of each member, their emotions, their approximate locations. And sometimes, in moments of extreme danger or intense emotion, he could sense echoes of people close to the pack. People like Ariella. He searched. He extended his awareness beyond the castle walls, beyond the gardens, trying to find that familiar presence he had always recognized. He found only emptiness. No, not emptiness. Something more disturbing. An echo of fear, of confusion. And then, nothing. Absolute silence, as if she had been torn from his reach. Lionel opened his eyes, his heart beating wrong. She's not in the castle. Eric came to his side. Did you feel anything? I felt fear. And then nothing. Lionel turned to Edmund. When was the last time you saw her? After the incident in the hall, she said she needed air. We followed, but she asked us to stay. Said she'd return shortly. His voice broke. We shouldn't have let her. Lionel was about to respond when another guard entered, carrying a sealed parchment. Your Majesty. This arrived with the night messengers. The seal was unmistakable. Black and silver. The crest of Dravok. Lionel tore the parchment from the guard's hands, breaking the seal violently. He read the words once, twice, feeling the fury rise with every line. King Lionel of Kael'thar, Lady Ariella is under my protection in Dravok. Do not worry, she is being treated with all the courtesy a lady deserves. I propose we resolve this misunderstanding in an honorable manner. A duel of alphas. You against me. Under the witness of both realms. The victor will have the right to claim her. I await your answer. Or should I take your silence as cowardice? King Aldrin of Dravok. The paper ignited in Lionel's hands. Literally. Flames sprang from the parchment, fed by the fury burning beneath his skin, reducing it to ash in seconds. Lionel's mind raced. Ariella had disappeared only hours earlier, at most 6 or 7 since she had run from the ball, and the letter already stated she was under protection in Dravok. Dravok was 2 days' ride from Kael'thar, perhaps 3 at a normal pace. Which meant everything had been planned, not merely observed, planned weeks in advance. Aldrin had men positioned not only to abduct, but to transport. Rested horses, prepared routes, perhaps even relay points along the way to maintain speed. Ariella had been torn from Kael'thar and carried across the borders like express cargo. And Aldrin was already in Dravok waiting. Confident. Because he knew, he was absolutely certain, that Lionel would come. The royal guard around him felt the emotional explosion, through the mental bond that connected them. The king's fury was not his alone. It was theirs as well, reverberating through the pack like a shockwave. One by one, the guard's eyes began to glow. Gold. Yellow. The wolf within each of them answering the alpha's call. Eric watched the ashes fall and frowned, struggling against his own wolf pressing to surface. How did he know? The question came low, urgent. How did Aldrin know about Ariella? Lionel stood still for a second, and then the truth struck him like ice. Spies. The word came out as a growl. Aldrin has spies embedded here, in the castle, perhaps for months. Through the bond, the guard felt the guilt mixed with fury. They felt the king's self-realization, the understanding that every reaction of his, every loss of control had been observed and catalogued. One of the captains stepped forward, eyes still glowing yellow. Your Majesty, if there are spies, we can— Too late for that now. Lionel turned, and his eyes burned with such intense gold they seemed incandescent. Aldrin never acts without calculating every move. He watched us. He watched me. His voice took on a bitter edge. Every time I looked at her, every time I lost control when I saw her with Eric, every damned reaction he saw. And he waited. Raw emotion cut through the bond like a blade. The entire guard felt it. Not just the rage, but the pain, the regret, the absolute determination. Eric clenched his fists, his own eyes flickering yellow before he forced control back. Waited for what? For the perfect moment. Lionel ran a hand through his hair, frustration and guilt tangled together. For public proof that the Alpha King of Kael'thar is ruled by feelings he cannot control, that I am weak. He turned to the guard, and through the mental bond, sent something that was not words, but absolute certainty. She is mine. And I am going to get her. Every guard felt it, and every single one responded with unshakable loyalty. The humiliation at the ball was the signal, Lionel continued aloud. Ariella leaving alone for the gardens was the opportunity, and Aldrin's men were ready, probably inside the castle itself, waiting. Lionel clenched his jaw. Fast, calculated, no traces. The silence that followed was heavy. Lady Helena sobbed. So our daughter is in the hands of that monster because of me. Lionel faced Ariella's parents without flinching. Aldrin took her because he knew she is my weakness, and he was right. The public admission, before the guard, before her parents, before witnesses, echoed through the hall. Eric stepped forward, his eyes returning to their normal green with visible effort. Then we go get her. Lionel nodded. His eyes still burned gold, and so did those of half the guard, an entire hall of wolves on the brink of transformation. Summon the War Council, now, and prepare my armor. He looked at Eric, then at the entire guard, and through the bond sent a single emotion, lethal determination. Aloud, the promise came out as a growl. Aldrin wants a spectacle, I'll give him one. But on my terms. And when I'm finished. He did not need to finish. The promise rippled through the pack. And every wolf there, Royal Guard, Beta, warriors, felt the same thing. Aldrin of Dravok would regret ever laying a hand on the Alpha's woman. The War Council meeting was quick and to the point. Lionel laid out the terms. The duel would take place on neutral ground, specifically in the Valley of the Ancient Moon, a sacred site between the two kingdoms that, by chance, lay closer to Kelthar's ancestral lands. A place where Lionel's bloodline would have a natural advantage. The elders protested. They said it was risky, that Aldrin would cheat, that the king should not expose himself like this. Lionel silenced them with a single look. Aldrin touched something he never should have, and he will pay. Anyone else have objections? No one spoke. Good. Prepare the horses. We ride at dawn. When the council dispersed, Eric stayed behind. You're going to bring her back, he said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. I will. Lionel adjusted the sword at his waist. And when I do, I'm going to fix everything. All the crap I've done. Every mistake. Eric smiled, small, but genuine. Finally. Lionel looked at his friend, his brother, really, and nodded. Thank you, for not giving up on me. Someone had to give you a reality check. Eric shrugged. I'd rather it hadn't had to come to this, but... I know. Lionel held out his hand. Eric clasped it, and the bond between Beta and Alpha, which had been strained for so long, finally settled back into balance. Ariella woke with her head throbbing. The first thing she noticed was the smell. It was not the familiar scent of pine and damp earth that permeated Kelthar. It was something harsher. Ash, iron, and something that made her wolf instinctively recoil. Dravok. The memory returned in jagged fragments, leaving the ball, the gardens, Eric trying to comfort her. Then, shadows, hands grabbing her, a cloth over her face with a sweet, suffocating smell. Struggle. Darkness. She tried to sit up and felt her body protest. She was not injured, at least not visibly, but every muscle ached as if she had fought against her own capture. She probably had. The room was large, luxurious even. Dark stone walls, heavy curtains blocking the outside light. A bed she had awakened in that was far too big, far too comfortable for a prisoner. But the locked door on the far side of the room made one thing clear. No matter how gilded the cage, it was still a prison. Ariella stood, testing her legs, and walked to the window. She pulled back the curtains, and the light of dawn flooded the space. Outside lay a training courtyard. Guards patrolled. Black and silver banners fluttered in the wind. The crest of Dravok. Her stomach twisted. The door opened without warning. Ariella turned, her posture instinctively defensive. A man entered. Tall, broad-shouldered, brown hair cut short in a military style. He wore combat attire, reinforced black leather, knee-high boots, and carried the presence of someone accustomed to being obeyed. His eyes were dark gray, cold, calculating. Aldrin. She recognized him even without ever having seen him in person. The way he moved, the way he occupied space, screamed rival alpha. Lady Ariella. His voice was deep, controlled, laced with false courtesy. I hope you rested well. Ariella did not answer. She only stared at him, refusing to show fear. Aldrin smiled, small, not reaching his eyes. Silent. Interesting. I expected more resistance. What do you want? The words came out steady, steadier than she felt. Straight to the point. I like that. Aldrin walked to a side table, pouring wine into 2 goblets as if they were old friends sharing a drink. I want what everyone wants, Lady Ariella. Power, respect, and the fall of a king who has ruled lands that should have been mine for far too long. He extended a goblet toward her. Ariella did not move. Aldrin shrugged and drank from her goblet. Your king received my proposal. A duel. Honorable. Witnessed by both realms. He set the goblet down, his eyes fixed on her. The victor earns the right to claim you. Ariella's blood ran cold. I am not property. Aren't you? Aldrin tilted his head. Then why did Lionel allow my men to take you so easily? Why did he not protect you? The pain cut deep, but Ariella bit her tongue. Aldrin continued, seizing the opening. He humiliated you before all of Kelthar, suggested that you were... what? Unfaithful. Unworthy. His smile widened. And now he expects me to believe he will come rescue you? That he will risk everything for someone he publicly diminished? He will come. The words slipped out before Ariella could stop them. You sound very certain of that. I am. Aldrin laughed, a humorless sound. Admirable, blind loyalty, or perhaps foolish hope. He stepped closer, each stride deliberate. Let me spare you the suffering, Lady Ariella. Get used to it. I am stronger than Lionel, older, more experienced, more willing to do whatever is necessary to win. Ariella lifted her chin. You underestimate him. Something dangerous flashed in Aldrin's eyes. Do I underestimate? He stopped a few paces from her. Or do you overestimate? Tell me, Lady Ariella, after everything he has done, after years of ignoring you, of flirting with other women while expecting you to bleed in silence, why do you still believe in him? Because I love him, the inner voice screamed. But Ariella swallowed the words. Because I know him, and you do not. Aldrin studied her for a long moment. Perhaps you do. Perhaps you do not. He turned back toward the door, stopping at the threshold. But knowledge does not change facts. And the fact is that I have my safeguards. Let us say I have prepared a few surprises should your king decide to show up. Ariella's stomach sank. You are going to cheat. I am going to win, Aldrin corrected, his smile returning. By any means necessary. And when I win, you will be my Luna. Kelthar will fall, and Lionel... He paused, savoring the words. Lionel will learn that there are consequences for weakness. The door closed behind him with finality. Ariella stood in the middle of the empty room, her heart beating wrong. What if he does not come? What if he comes and loses? Aldrin was older, more experienced, and he had clearly planned everything in advance. He had cards up his sleeve, tricks, Poisons, perhaps. Anything to ensure victory. But then another voice echoed in her mind. The voice of the 7-year-old girl who had watched Lionel plan training strategies 3 steps ahead, who had seen him defeat larger opponents with intelligence rather than brute force. Lionel is clever. If Aldrin has a card up his sleeve, then he must have one too. Lionel rode without stopping. The royal guard followed in tight formation, their horses devouring the distance between Caelthar and the Valley of the Ancient Moon as if they felt their rider's urgency. No one spoke. There was no need. Through the mental bond, they all felt the same thing, unshakable determination mixed with contained fury. Eric rode beside Lionel, posture alert, eyes sweeping the horizon. When they sighted the valley at dawn of the second day, Lionel pulled the reins. The Valley of the Ancient Moon stretched before them, a natural depression between mountains, ringed by ancient stones marked with symbols of packs long extinct. By tradition, it was neutral territory, but Lionel knew every inch of that place. His father had brought him there as a child, taught him about the roots of the bloodline, about how the land recognized alpha blood. If Aldrin wanted spectacle, he would have it. But on the stage Lionel had chosen. The arena was set when Lionel arrived. Wooden stakes marked the combat circle. Witnesses from both realms positioned themselves on opposite sides. Caelthar to the north, Dravok to the south. Elders dressed in ceremonial cloaks occupied a raised platform, ready to judge and ensure the ancient rules were followed. Aldrin was already there, standing at the center of the arena, arms crossed, the confident posture of someone who believed victory was assured. He wore light armor, reinforced leather that allowed movement without sacrificing protection. The sword at his waist was long, the blade slightly curved, efficient for quick cuts. Lionel dismounted. Eric gripped his shoulder for a second, a brief gesture of support, before moving away to join the guard. Lionel walked into the arena, each step measured, controlled. He wore similar armor to Aldrin's, but his sword was straight, heavier. Forged from Caelthar steel, balanced for strength and precision. The 2 kings faced each other at the center of the circle. "I thought you might not come," Aldrin said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Disappointed?" Lionel replied, his voice low but carrying something dangerous. "Surprised. I thought pride would speak louder." "Funny. I thought the same of you." Lionel tilted his head. "Yet here we are. 2 fools fighting over something you will never have." Aldrin narrowed his eyes. "We shall see." One of the elders stepped forward, his voice echoing through the valley. "The duel will take place in 2 phases, according to ancient law. First, combat in human form with weapons. Second, combat in wolf form. Surrender or incapacitation determines the victor. Death is permitted only in self-defense." He paused, looking at both kings. "Are you ready?" Both nodded. The elder raised his hand, then let it fall. "Begin!" Aldrin attacked first. Fast, precise. The blade cutting the air in a deadly arc aimed at Lionel's neck. Lionel blocked, the clash of metal echoing through the valley. The force of the impact reverberated up his arms, but he held firm. Aldrin retreated, spun, struck again, this time aiming for the ribs. Lionel dodged, countered with a horizontal slash that Aldrin blocked at the last second. They separated, circling, assessing. The crowd watched in tense silence. Aldrin smiled. "You are slower than I expected." Lionel did not respond. He only studied his opponent, searching for patterns, weaknesses. The fight resumed. Aldrin was good. Lionel acknowledged that. Every movement was calculated, every attack purposeful. He wasted no energy. He did not expose himself unnecessarily. But there was something. Lionel blocked another strike and felt it. A strange tingling where Aldrin's blade had grazed his arm moments earlier. It was not a deep cut, just a scratch. But the sensation was wrong. Poison. The realization hit like a punch. He is cheating. Poison on the blade. Lionel retreated, creating distance, analyzing. The tingling began to spread. It was not lethal, at least not immediately, but it was draining strength, making movements heavier, reflexes slower. Aldrin noticed the change and pressed forward, exploiting it. His blade found Lionel's shoulder, another shallow cut. More poison. Lionel felt his body respond poorly. His legs wavered, his vision darkened at the edges. The Kael'thar crowd tensed. Through the bond, the guard felt what was happening, and outrage burned among them. But they could not intervene. The rules were clear. Aldrin smiled, confidence growing. Do you feel it, Lionel? It is subtle. It does not kill. It only weakens. Enough. Lionel staggered, leaning on his sword like a crutch. Outwardly, he looked defeated. Inwardly, the thought came clear as crystal. But I would not be so foolish as to come here without a card of my own. Lionel knew something Aldrin did not. He knew that the valley was not merely neutral. It was sacred to Kael'thar's bloodline. That the marked stones responded to ancestral blood. That the land itself strengthened wolves who carried the mark of the ancient alphas in their veins. And he had chosen that place for exactly that reason. Aldrin advanced, blade raised for the final strike. Surrender. Spare yourself the humiliation. Lionel lifted his eyes, and they burned gold. There is still another phase. The elder, seeing the human combat had reached its limit, raised his hand. First phase concluded. Prepare for transformation. Aldrin stepped back, irritated that he had not finished it, but confident, because Lionel was weak, poisoned, and weak wolves did not win duels. Lionel straightened, ignoring pain, fatigue, the poison burning through his veins, and began to transform. The change was never easy. Bones broke and reformed, muscles expanded, skin gave way to fur black as night. The senses exploded, hearing amplified, scent catching every nuance, vision capturing movement no human could ever see. When Lionel emerged from the transformation, he was no longer a man. He was a wolf, enormous, muscular, golden eyes glowing with intelligence and purpose. Black fur absorbed the dawn light, making him seem forged of solid shadow. Across the arena, Aldrin completed his own transformation. Also large, dark brown fur, gray eyes reflecting calculated cunning. The two wolves faced each other, and then something changed. The valley responded. The ancient stones began to glow, softly at first, then stronger. Symbols carved into the ground ignited with silvery light, forming patterns that converged toward Lionel. Aldrin felt it and recoiled, confused. Lionel felt it too, and understood. Ancestral land, recognizes alpha blood of Kael'thar. The poison weakening his human body had no power here. Not when the land itself strengthened him, recognized him, fed him with energy flowing through generations of his bloodline. Lionel felt the fatigue evaporate, felt strength return, muscles responding as they should, senses sharpening beyond normal. Aldrin realized his mistake. Too late. Lionel attacked, not with the hesitation of earlier combat. With pure fury, unleashed instinct, ancestral power surging through him like a flood. He collided with Aldrin with force that made the ground tremble. Fangs met fur and flesh, claws tore. The two wolves rolled across the ground in a whirlwind of violence, each seeking the other's throat, seeking the blow that would end the fight. But Lionel was faster now, stronger, fueled by the land his ancestors had walked, by the blood in his veins, by the determination of a man who finally understood what was at stake. Aldrin had expected a desperate king, ruled by emotion, easy to manipulate. He found an alpha on his own ancestral ground. Lionel found the opening. Aldrin tried to evade, but he was not fast enough. Lionel's fangs closed around his throat. not to kill, but to subdue. Pressure enough to cut off air, to force surrender. Aldrin struggled, tried to break free, but every movement only deepened Lionel's control. The crowd watched in absolute silence. Seconds dragged on. And then Aldrin stopped fighting. His body went slack. Submission. Lionel held for 3 more seconds, ensuring all saw, all understood, before releasing him. Aldrin collapsed to the ground, panting, defeated. Lionel stepped back, the transformation slowly reversing until he was human again, naked, covered in blood and sweat, but standing, victorious. The elder raised his voice. "The victor is Lionel, Alpha King of Kael'thar." The Kael'thar crowd erupted in roars of approval. Lionel ignored it. He only looked at Aldrin, still on the ground, still in wolf form, gray eyes burning with humiliation. "You touched what you should not have," Lionel said, his voice low but carrying so all could hear. "And now you will pay the price." Aldrin shifted back, dragging himself upright, one hand at his injured throat. "You won the duel. Do not change the rules." "I am changing nothing. I am merely reclaiming what is mine." Lionel stepped forward. "Lady Ariella will be returned to me, immediately. And you—" He leaned in, his voice dropping to something only Aldrin could hear. "If you ever think of touching what is mine again, there will be no duel. There will be no rules. Only war. And I promise you, there will not be one stone left upon another in your kingdom." Aldrin swallowed hard. Lionel straightened, turning to the elders. "I demand the terms be honored. Lady Ariella is to be returned to Kael'thar. Now." The elders exchanged looks and nodded. One of them turned to the Dravok guards. "Bring the lady." Lionel waited. Eric approached, offering a cloak to cover his nudity. Lionel accepted it, wrapping the fabric around his waist, eyes fixed on the entrance to the Dravok encampment. Each second felt like an eternity. And then he saw her. Ariella, escorted by 2 guards, walking with her posture straight, head held high, refusing to look broken even after days in captivity. When her eyes met his across the distance, the entire world vanished. Lionel began to walk toward her. She stopped, the guards stepping back as they sensed the intensity in the victorious king's gaze. They stood there, separated by meters that felt like miles. Lionel wanted to say 1,000 things, wanted to apologize, to declare himself, to promise he would never let her be hurt again. But the words did not come. He simply walked to her, closed the distance, and without asking permission, pulled her into an embrace. Ariella stiffened for a second, surprised, confused. Then her body gave in, her arms rising to wrap around his neck as she buried her face against his shoulder. And she cried. Not from fear, not from sorrow, from relief. Lionel held her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. Because she was. "I promise you," he whispered against her hair, too softly for anyone else to hear. "When we return, I will do this right. All of it. The way it should have been from the start." Ariella did not answer, but she tightened her hold. And for now, that was enough. The journey back to Kael'thar was quiet. Lionel rode beside Ariella, the royal guard forming a discreet escort around them. No one spoke much. There was no need. The victory was secured. Ariella was safe. And the rest would need to be resolved with words that had not yet been spoken. Ariella looked ahead at the road, her black hair tied in a simple braid, the dress she had worn to the ball, now dirty and wrinkled, replaced by traveling clothes the guard had brought. She looked tired, not only physically, but emotionally drained by everything that had happened over the past days. Lionel wanted to say something, anything. But every time he opened his mouth, the words died before they were born. It was Ariella who broke the silence, Thank you. Her voice was low. For coming to get me. Lionel turned to her, something tightening in his chest. You do not need to thank me. I know. She interrupted, still not looking at him. But still, thank you. The silence returned, but it was different now, less tense, more hopeful. Lionel took a deep breath. When we reach Kelthar, we need to talk. Truly. Without an audience. Without games. He paused. Just you and me. Ariella finally looked at him. Her violet eyes were tired, but there was something there, a spark of something he had not seen in a long time. Hope. She simply looked at him, and they kept riding. Kelthar received them in celebration. News of the victory had arrived before them. Swift messengers ensured the realm knew its king had won the duel, that Lady Ariella was safe, that Dravok had been humiliated. When they passed through the main gates, the people crowded the streets, shouting Lionel's name, throwing flowers, celebrating as if it were a festival. Lionel waved, maintaining his royal bearing, but his eyes searched for only one thing: Ariella's home. Her family's estate stood near the castle, an elegant construction of light stone with well-kept gardens, a sign of ancient noble lineage. When they stopped before the gate, Ariella's parents were already waiting. Lady Helena ran to her daughter before she even dismounted, pulling her into a desperate embrace, tears flowing freely. My girl, my girl. Lord Edmund gripped Lionel's shoulder, his voice thick. Thank you, Your Majesty. Thank you for bringing her back. Lionel only nodded, his throat too tight for words. He watched as Ariella was taken inside the house, embraced by her parents, finally safe. The rest of the day passed in a haze of duties. Lionel met with the council, recounted the details of the duel, made sure the borders were reinforced in case Dravok attempted retaliation. He received congratulations from nobles, listened to speeches about honor and victory, accepted it all with the patience a king was expected to have. But his mind was elsewhere. It was in violet eyes and black hair. It was in years wasted and words left unsaid. It was in a conversation that had to happen before any public claim could make sense. When night fell, Lionel dismissed everyone and left the castle. Alone. No guards. No escort. Just a man walking through Kelthar's quiet streets toward a house he had known since childhood. He stopped at the gate. The estate was still. Gardens washed in moonlight. Lionel took a deep breath and knocked. It was Lord Edmund who opened the door. He blinked, surprised to see the king there, alone, without ceremony. Your Majesty? I need to speak with Ariella. The words came out direct. Please. Edmund studied him for a long moment, then he nodded. She's in the back gardens. Lionel crossed through the house. He found her exactly where Edmund had said, sitting on a stone bench beneath an ancient tree, staring up at the star-filled sky. She wore a simple dress, her hair loose down her back in natural waves. She looked at peace, for the first time in days. Lionel stopped a few paces away, suddenly unsure. Ariella felt his presence and turned. Her eyes widened slightly. Lionel, may I join you? She hesitated, then nodded, shifting to make space on the bench. Lionel sat, keeping a respectful distance, his hands resting on his knees. Silence stretched between them. It was Ariella who spoke first. You shouldn't be here, without guards, without... I know. Lionel cut in gently. But I had to. I had to talk to you. He turned to face her. Just us. Ariella held her breath, something in his tone making her heart quicken. Lionel drew a deep breath. I ruined everything. The words came out raw, honest. From the start. From the moment my father died and I became king, I ruined everything between us. Ariella said nothing. She only waited. Lionel continued, the words flowing now that the dam had broken. I was afraid. afraid of feeling too much, afraid you'd never see me as anything beyond the boy you grew up with. So I built walls. I pretended I didn't care. I was with other women, hoping you would." He let out a humorless laugh. "Hoping you'd get jealous, that you'd react, that you'd show you cared." "I did," Ariella said, her voice trembling. Every time I looked away, every time I left early, every time I cried where you couldn't see." Lionel closed his eyes, the pain slicing deep. "I know. Now I know. And I hate myself for being so blind. So stupid." He opened his eyes, turning fully toward her. "Ariella, I spent years thinking you loved Eric. Years convinced I never had a chance. And when I finally saw the truth, I'd already made such a mess I didn't know how to fix it. Then why did you humiliate me at the ball?" The question came out low, but heavy with hurt. "Why did you say that in front of everyone?" "Because I'm a coward." The admission came without hesitation. "Because I saw you with Eric after everything, and jealousy blinded me. Because I'd rather strike at you than admit I was terrified of losing you." Lionel reached out, stopping inches from her hand without touching it. "But I don't have excuses anymore. I don't have masks anymore. I only have the truth." "What truth?" Lionel took her hand, gently, as if it were the most precious thing in the world. "That I love you. That I always have. Since we were children. Since the first time you smiled at me like I was just Lionel. Not the king. Always." His voice broke. "And I wasted years. Years when we could have been happy. Because I was too proud, too afraid to admit it." Tears slid down Ariella's face before she could stop them. "You hurt me," she said, her voice thin. "So many times. So many. I know. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right. If you'll let me." Lionel squeezed her hand softly. "I'm not asking you to forgive me right now. I'm not asking you to forget. I'm only asking for a chance. A chance to prove I can be the man you deserve. Not the idiot king. Just me." Ariella looked at him through her tears, at the man she'd loved since she understood what the word meant, the man who had broken her and was now here, vulnerable, honest, exposed. And Eric? The question escaped before she could think. "He loves Beatrice. Always has. And I was too blind to see it." Lionel let out a wet laugh. "He's my brother, my beta, and never, not once, has he looked at you the way I do." Ariella closed her eyes, processing. When she opened them, there was decision there. "If I give you this chance..." She paused. "Do you promise? No games, no masks, no pushing me away when you get scared?" "I promise." Lionel lifted her hand and pressed it to his chest, where his heart beat unevenly. "Do you feel that? It's been beating like this since the first moment I saw you again after Dravok. It beats like this every time you're near. And I won't pretend otherwise anymore." Ariella felt his heart beneath her palm. Fast, strong, real. And something inside her gave way. "I love you too," she whispered. "Even after everything. Even when I didn't want to, I never managed to stop." Lionel held his breath, and then he closed the distance. The kiss wasn't gentle. It wasn't careful. It was years of frustration, pain, and unreturned love finally finding release. His hands rose to her face, holding her as if he were afraid she would vanish. Her hands clutched his shirt, pulling him closer. When they parted, breathless, Lionel rested his forehead against hers. "Tomorrow," he said, his voice rough. "Tomorrow, in front of the entire kingdom, I'll do this the right way. I'll claim you the way it always should have been. Publicly. Without fear." He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. "If you'll accept." Ariella smiled, small, but genuine. Ask me tomorrow." "I will." Lionel stole another kiss, softer this time. The great hall of Kelthar had never been so full. Nobles from every region had arrived. The news had spread. King Lionel would make an important announcement. After the victory over Dravok, after the dramatic rescue of Lady Ariella, everyone wanted to know what came next. Ariella was in chambers prepared for her inside the castle, attendants helping her dress. She wore a gown, something in tones of silver and white, fluid fabric that caught the light like water under moonlight. Her hair was loose, falling in natural waves. Lady Helena held her daughter's hands, eyes shining. "Are you sure?" Ariella nodded. "I am." And she was. Because the conversation the night before had changed everything. It hadn't erased the pain. It hadn't erased the mistakes. But it had shown that Lionel finally understood. That he was finally willing to be honest. To fight for them. And that was enough to begin. When she descended into the great hall, the murmur died. All eyes turned to her. She saw familiar faces. She saw curiosity. She even saw a few who likely expected her to stumble. But it didn't matter. Because at the center of the hall, beside the throne, stood Lionel. He wore formal attire, a black tunic embroidered in silver, the royal mantle over his shoulders, the crown resting on dark hair. He looked every inch the king he was. But when his eyes found hers, Ariella saw beyond the crown. She saw the man who had been in her gardens the night before. Vulnerable. Honest. Hers. Lionel stepped down from the raised dais and walked toward her. The entire hall watched. He stopped before her, extending his hand. Ariella took it, and together they walked to the center of the hall, where all could see, where all could hear. Lionel turned to the crowd. "Many of you know what has happened in recent days," he began, his voice clear, carrying royal authority. "You know of the duel. You know of Dravok. You know that Lady Ariella was taken, and that I brought her home." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the hall. Lionel continued. "But what many of you do not know is the full truth. The truth about why Aldrin chose her. Why he knew that touching her would be touching the only weakness I had." He paused, the weight of what came next evident. "Because I love her. I always have. And I spent years being too much of a coward to admit it." The silence was absolute. Lionel turned to Ariella, ignoring the hundreds of eyes fixed on them. "I made mistakes. Many. I hurt you in ways I cannot undo. I wasted time I will never get back." His voice dropped, growing intimate even with an audience. "But if you allow me, I will spend every day proving I've learned, that I've changed, that you are not weakness. You are strength. You are the reason I fight, the reason I won." He took both her hands, his posture shifting, no longer king, but man. "Ariella, before everyone here, I ask you, will you be my Luna? Not because tradition demands it, not because the kingdom expects it, but because I choose you, today, tomorrow, always." Tears were already streaming down Ariella's face. Everyone waited, and she smiled. "Yes." The word came out clear, firm, without hesitation. "Yes, Lionel, I accept." The hall erupted. Applause, shouts of celebration, roars of approval from the royal guard as they felt through the bond the king's absolute joy. But Lionel had eyes only for her. He pulled her into a kiss, not as fierce as the night before, but heavy with promise, with commitment, with something that was finally right. When they parted, he pressed his forehead to hers, whispering too softly for anyone else to hear. "Thank you for giving me this chance. Don't make me regret it," she whispered back, but she was smiling. Lionel pulled back enough to lift his hand, silencing the hall. "By ancient law and by the bond of our pack, I claim Ariella as my Luna. Let all be witnesses. He turned to her again, his eyes already shifting. Bright gold. The marking was part of the ritual. Ancient. Necessary. A seal that told the whole world she was his and he was hers. Lionel lowered his head toward her neck, his teeth lengthening slightly. Not to harm. Only to mark. Ariella tilted her head to the side, baring her skin, her heart pounding unevenly. When his teeth pressed, soft but firm, against the spot where neck met shoulder, the pain was brief. Almost imperceptible. What came after was something else. Heat. Connection. As if something between them sealed permanently, irrevocably. Lionel pulled back, his eyes still gold, and she saw the mark, small, silver, glowing against her skin like a living tattoo. A symbol of claiming. A symbol that she was Luna of Kael'thar. The hall thundered with renewed celebration. Eric approached, Beatrice beside him, both smiling. "Finally," Eric said, clapping Lionel's shoulder. "I thought you'd never get here." Lionel laughed, genuine, light, free. So did I. The celebration continued into the night. Music, dancing, food, wine. Kael'thar was not only celebrating victory over Dravok, but the union of its king with the woman who should have been Luna all along. When the moon was high, and most guests had already left, Lionel and Ariella finally withdrew. He led her through the castle corridors to the royal chambers, now theirs. Not only his. He closed the door behind them, and finally, they were alone. Ariella turned to him, something nervous mixed with anticipation in her violet eyes. Lionel walked to her slowly, his hands finding her face with tenderness. "No regrets?" he asked softly. "None," she answered. And when he kissed her this time, there was no audience, no kingdom. Nothing but the two of them and the future they could finally build together. The right way. From the start. Dawn broke over Kael'thar with the promise of better days. The kingdom had faced threats. It had bled. It had nearly lost something precious. But it had endured. Stronger. More united. Lionel woke with Ariella in his arms, her black hair spread across the pillow, the claiming mark visible on her neck, a permanent symbol that she was his and he was hers. And for the first time in years, he felt no fear, no doubt. Only certainty. Certainty that there were things worth fighting for. People worth bleeding for. And that sometimes, the greatest act of courage wasn't winning duels or ruling kingdoms. It was simply being honest, being vulnerable, being human. Ariella stirred, her eyes opening slowly to meet his. She smiled. And Lionel knew that no matter what came, they would face it together. As it always should have been.